Welcome to this week's OK at Work with myself, Sarah Sawyer, and my colleague Russell Berger, both attorneys at Offit Kurman. And today we are talking about injunctive relief and the difference between injunctive relief and just pursuing damages in normal course. So as anyone who has litigated a case for damages probably knows, that can take a long time. And it's also very much a process of looking for money damages. Sometimes it's punitive as well, though that's rare. But it's a law. It's kind of like what you think about from like a regular civil court proceeding type of situation. If you're in a higher court, it usually takes a really long time. Maybe it could take a year, could take several years. If you're in a lower court, it might be a little bit quicker, but still probably several months until you're getting a remedy, and it's usually damages for something that's happened to you to try to make that person whole. But there is a separate type of relief called injunctive relief that is a little bit different. What are some things that people should consider as it relates to injunctive relief, Russell?
Yeah, and this really, it's really kind of top of mind right now because we recently had the conversation about non-competes and the various alternatives that can be used to supplement or replace non-competes if they do in fact go away, such as employee non-solicits, customer non-solicits, confidentiality provisions, and the like. But really, what injunctive relief does, instead of saying, "Hey, you breached a contract and it cost me X dollars, so pay me," which is like you said, the traditional damages model is, injunctive relief gets used when a party says, "You've breached the contract and I don't know how much this is going to cost me. It's not going to be feasible to calculate it, and I'm going to suffer irreparable harm as a result. So, court, you need to order this person to stop doing the thing that they're doing that's causing me harm. Stop breaching the contract because damages will never make up for what I'm going to lose here." And that's what a lot of these cases, when you litigate for injunctive relief, and that litigation process is also expensive, but it gets compacted and compressed into a much shorter time frame typically. So you do a lot of that fighting up front. But when you litigate these issues, that's often what a court will zero in on. Obviously, there has to be a breach, and you have to have a reasonable likelihood of success on the merits. But one of the key issues that the court's going to look at is, well, if I don't do something, is this plaintiff going to be unable to protect their business? Are they going to survive this? Is it going to be irreparable harm, or is it something that it stinks, but if you wait 2 years and you get $1 million judgment, then the court system has made you whole. So that irreparable harm issue is really one of the foremost aspects of this analysis. And for example, like if it's confidential information, if it's trade secret, and that gets out into the public, and then you no longer have a competitive advantage, I think that's an easier thing to establish as irreparable harm than the solicitation of customers. Although that may still there are arguments as to when and how that may be irreparable harm as well. But there's a sliding scale on these remedies.
Yeah, as you can imagine, the fact that the court's going to act and stop someone from doing something can feel pretty extreme in a lot of circumstances. So it's not something they do lightly. And that irreparable harm, as you mentioned, Russell, it's challenging to prove, and it's really limited in circumstance and scope because it really is the court reaching in and impacting behavior instead of just kind of examining something that's already occurred and then deciding what to do with it, right? So it's definitely a challenge to meet that. And I find a lot with clients, I don't know if this has been your experience as well, but when someone's being harmed as it relates to a contract breach, from an emotional standpoint, I have found my clients often think they're being irreparably harmed, right? So there is like definitely a technical definition here that we're leaning on. It's not, I think that's something to keep in mind because a lot of times, a lot of different types of damages and issues can seem like they would fit in that category for someone. Another category that we see this in a lot where there might actually be irreparable harm is reputation risk, right? Reputation issues. So defamation, those types of matters as well. So that's somewhere you might see this in other contexts as well. And that's one where definitely emotions are alive and well in those circumstances, and people are really feeling that irreparable piece.
Yeah, well, and defamation is a tough one too, because there's something known as the doctrine of prior restraint. So, we've got the First Amendment in this country, so courts are extremely hesitant to stop someone from speaking, and giving their opinion on certain things, or making comments publicly. They prefer to remedy that with damages where they can, and that is usually the bias. Is courts. Are more inclined to deal with things as a matter of damages than they are to proactively intervene in an ongoing dispute. So, and those things that can be overcome, that can be done, and there's different mechanisms for that. There's things like TRO, temporary restraining order, which if you're in a real time crunch is the first step, and usually they last for if you get one, they last for a couple weeks and then they expire. And in that couple weeks, the court will hold a hearing on a preliminary injunction, which is a more robust evidentiary hearing. So a TRO might just be, it might even be one-sided. The court might enter a restraining order without even hearing from the other party, but then say, we're going to have a hearing on this in 2 weeks. And I want witnesses. I want to, I want to, in some respects, try the case in a couple of weeks, which can be it can be a lot of work in a short amount of time to get ramped up for that. And then if you get a preliminary injunction, the case continues and it then kind of gets into a more normal track, with a final hearing on the merits at the end of the day. But oftentimes, if you get a preliminary injunction, by the time you would get to the final injunction hearing, the time is run. At least in what we do in the employment space, if you've got a 1 year restriction and the court enters a preliminary injunction, it might be a year before you're back in front of the court on a substantive hearing anyway. So, that may, bring things to a close relatively swiftly.
Yeah, and the speed of all of this, you focus a lot, Russell, on the speed, and that is something to really keep in mind. That's what, when you talk about expense, that's what really leads to a lot of the expense. It also means if you've got one filed against you, you've got to act quickly. You've got to get an attorney involved. You've got to get them all the information. It's time consuming. It's for counsel and for the parties involved, because when normally you'd be a normal course, say like, all right, well, gather this information and send it to me, and then we'll put together an argument. We'll do this. It's much quicker than that, especially when you're dealing with a TRO and you've found out that one has been, maybe issued against you. And so it's always really important to act quickly as the individual as well.
Yeah. Jump on it quickly and recognize that this is going to be a case specific strategic decision, and you should go through that strategic process, as quickly as you can.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Russell. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Sarah.